Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Russia to formally annex 4 more areas of Ukraine. Finland closes border to Russian tourists. Plus, Hurricane Ian brings severe flooding, high winds and storm surges to Florida. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Russian President Vladimir Putin is to hold a sign-in ceremony on Friday to annex 4 more areas of Ukraine after self-styled referendums condemned by Ukraine and the West as a sham. Russian-backed officials had earlier claimed the 5-day exercise secured almost total popular support, while so-called votes were held in Luhansk and Donetsk in the east and in Zaporizhia and Kherson in the south. The Russian president is expected to make the major speech at the Kremlin.
As Russia moves closer to annexing parts of Ukraine, Ukrainians are fleeing those Russian-occupied territories, dismissing the results of a 5-day vote that showed strong support for joining Russia. So-called referendums that Kiev and the West have widely discredited as illegal shams. Ukrainians here at a reception center for evacuees said people were forced to take ballots in the street by roving officials at gunpoint. But here in Moscow, preparations for the impending annexation move swiftly. The stage has been set up in the Red Square with giant video screens and billboards reading Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Russia. Those 4 provinces that stand to be annexed make up about 15% of Ukrainian territory altogether. The event echoes Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, which also followed a discredited referendum and was heralded by a Kremlin signing followed by a presidential victory speech in parliament. On Wednesday, the Russia-installed administrations of those 4 provinces formally asked Russian President Vladimir Putin to incorporate them into Russia. In a series of calls to rally international support against annexation, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to the leaders of countries, including Britain, Canada, Germany and Turkey, to press for more military aid and tougher sanctions on Moscow.
These referenda were straight from the Kremlin playbook.
The United States has said it will not recognize Russian-annexed areas across Ukraine.
These referenda were straight from the Kremlin playbook. They were manufactured and manipulated. Ukrainian civilians were forced to cast ballots under the watch of armed guards. We have seen videos and reports of armed officials going door to door, intimidating voters and stopping Ukrainians on the street and forcing them to vote. These so-called referenda have been an exercise in coercion and disinformation, executed by puppet authorities following orders from Russia. Based on our information, every aspect of this referendum process was pre-staged and orchestrated by the Kremlin. Weeks, if not months ago, Russian officials planned to announce these predetermined outcomes. The Russian government instructed security forces to occupy referendum workers as they collected votes, and the Russian government falsified the results to advance the lie that the Ukrainian people want to be part of Russia.
The U.S. has said it will impose sanctions on Russia because of the staged referendums, while EU member states are considering an 8th round of measures, including sanctions on anyone involved in the votes. 7 months after Russian forces invaded Ukraine from the north, east and south, war is still raging on front lines in all 4 areas. The capital of the southern region of Zaporizhia is firmly under the control of Ukraine's government, and a counter-offensive is underway in Kherson.
Finland has announced it's closing its border to Russian tourists from Friday, the last of Moscow's EU neighbours to do so. Poland, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania all closed their borders to Russian tourists earlier this month. But Russians will still be allowed to visit family or for work and study in Finland, according to the foreign minister. The decision comes after the number of Russians arriving at the border surged following a call-up of 300,000 military reservists by President Vladimir Putin.
Russian tourists into Finland. On 29 September 2022, the Finnish government issued a resolution to significantly restrict the entry of Russian tourists into Finland. The entry restrictions will enter into force on 30 September 2022, midnight, and they will remain in force until further notice. The aim of the resolution is to halt Russian tourism into Finland and transit through Finland to other Schengen countries. In the resolution, the government notes that the entry of Russian citizens in tourist purposes into Finland endangers Finland's international relations.
And Sweden has found a new leak in a major undersea pipeline carrying Russian natural gas to the EU, making it the fourth discovered this week. Denmark and Sweden reported gas leaks in the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines earlier this week. NATO says the incidents are the result of deliberate, reckless and irresponsible acts of sabotage. Russia has denied suggestions that it had attacked its own pipelines as predictable and stupid. Instead, the Russian Foreign Ministry said the blast had occurred in zones controlled by American intelligence. Meanwhile, the leaks affecting the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines should lead the EU to rethink the resilience of its critical infrastructure, and that's according to European gas expert Thierry Bross. He says that though it would be giving up on the option to flood the European market with gas, Russia is the most likely culprit. What he said was probably sabotage.
To blast 3 holes in so short distance and in an area that are close but not completely close. I mean, it can't be just one submarine hitting one line and making a mistake, because then why would they have done exactly the same on the other line 70 kilometers away? So yes, I would be on the sabotage side. If Russia has done this, then Russia has killed, as I told you, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, and so it has killed its option to, at some stage, flood the EU market. So this is why it points to Russia, but Russia is not the winner on all, it doesn't tick all the boxes. The box that Russia does tick is, if it's Russia, and again it's an if it's Russia, then we in Europe have been again very naive. We've been very naive when Russia didn't when Gazprom didn't refill its European storage. We should have looked at those pipes much more closely.
The United States has condemned what it says are Russia's reckless actions in and around Ukraine's nuclear facilities. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations in Vienna, Laura Holgate, told a briefing Moscow had brought us to the brink of nuclear catastrophe. On September the 16th, Ukraine's state nuclear company, Energoatom, said urgently needed spare parts and diesel fuel had been delivered to the Zaporizhzhia atomic power station, which is occupied by Russian troops. Both Moscow and Kyiv regularly accuse each other of shelling the facility, the largest of its kind in Europe.
In Europe, Russia's reckless actions in and around Ukraine's nuclear facilities have brought us to the brink of nuclear catastrophe. In the Middle East, Iran and Syria continue to flout legal obligations under their respective safeguards agreements with the IAEA. And in the Indo-Pacific, the People's Republic of China is rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal, and the DPRK recently declared its status as a nuclear weapon state as irreversible. This declaration comes as the DPRK has signaled through its own public statements that it is ready to conduct a 7th explosive nuclear test.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Justice Department has urged Congress to close legal gaps that make it harder for the United States to prosecute non-U.S. citizens for war crimes, saying such changes could pave the way for the prosecution of human rights crimes in Ukraine. And so other stories now. Hurricane Ian, which peaked at a Category 4 storm, is bringing severe flooding, high winds and storm surges to Florida. It's now losing power as it moves inland and has been downgraded to a Category 1 system. More than 2.5 million people in Florida have no electricity, and cities have been left submerged by floodwater. Emergency crews are sawing through fallen trees to reach people who are trapped in their homes, while millions are without mobile service. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says that rescue efforts are underway in southwest Florida after Hurricane Ian battered the area. He adds that reports of hundreds dead are unconfirmed and that he expects more clarity on the situation as crews respond to 911 calls throughout the day. Before we hear from the governor, let's speak to our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird. Maria, this is said to be one of the mightiest storms to hit the U.S. mainland in recent years. Give us an idea of the situation on ground now and the extent of damage so far.
You know, there's a large area that has been this storm, typically regions, but you're talking about it at some point has been. Think about Orlando, which is very inland, and having to even close down Disney, and to be able to be in a point where they were, you know, at the mercy of this hurricane. And think about all the tourists that come in town for this time of year that we're having to evacuate. And so this storm, it has been 100 years since the Tampa Bay area has even experienced any type of hurricane to this nature. And so this storm has obviously, as you see here, the Fort Myers area has been definitely hit very hard. Marco Island, the coast of Florida, they're seeing record flooding. And so this storm is one that I think will definitely be weeks, months, if not almost a year or more to be able to come out of.
And have there been any casualties reported so far? What are you hearing?
There have been 5 so far that have been confirmed. I heard you mention earlier that there were speculations of about 100, but there are tons of safety and saving lives efforts actually happening right now. You will probably be seeing footage of actual boats going into communities to try to rescue individuals. The challenge is really going to be, now the storm is over, if people are in environments where the flooding is continuing, whether or not they'll be able to survive if they do not receive any type of rescue efforts in the next day to 2 days. And so that's, I think at this time, it's the rescue efforts that need to be put forth, especially when you're talking about elderly or disabled individuals.
Okay, President Joe Biden has declared a major disaster and last night approved federal disaster funds for 9 counties in the state. Speak to us about what this means for the state's recovery and rescue efforts.
What this will mean is there'll be additional funding to be able to employ individuals, as you mentioned, for those rescue efforts. There'll be additional funding to be able to put toward infrastructure. As we know, there's millions of individuals without any type of power. And obviously, when you're without power for an extended period of time, that does put life and safety at risk. And so those efforts, that funding will be able to potentially employ more individuals and more workers that will be able to work on some of the infrastructure challenges. And so it's really going to be just to be able to ramp up resources to assist in this devastation that Florida has experienced.
And just before we let you go, what's the weather like now? Are we still seeing high winds in Florida?
Some areas are still experiencing some wind and rain, but for the most part, that has all left at this time, and it's actually moving up the coast. We're expecting to see the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast regions experience some impact, light rain, over the next couple of days as a result of Hurricane Ian.
All right, then, Maria, thanks a lot for the update. Well, still on the devastation we're seeing with Hurricane Ian, scientists say climate change is making hurricanes wetter, windier and more intense. They say there is also evidence that it's causing storms to travel more slowly, meaning they can dump more water in one place. Still ahead on the program. Iran's president says chaos will not be accepted as protest over women's death continues. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has made her first visit to the demilitarized zone separating the Koreas. Harris was seen observing North Korean territory through a pair of binoculars as soldiers accompanying her provided explanations. While speaking after VP Harris denounced North Korea as a country with a brutal dictatorship, an illegal arms program, and rampant human rights violations.
The DPRK has a ballistic missile launch program, apparently, including just yesterday, and are destabilizing the peace and security of this region. Our shared goal, the United States and the Republic of Korea, is a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Nearly 70 years since the Korean armistice, the threat of conflict remains. And we are reminded that the alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea stands ready to address any contingency. The commitment of the United States to the defense of the Republic of Korea, I will report, is ironclad. In the north, we see a brutal dictatorship, rampant human rights violations, and an unlawful weapons program that threatens peace and stability. The United States and the world seek a stable and peaceful Korean Peninsula where the DPRK is no longer a threat.
And now 50% of Africans' harvest is wasted, and nuclear technology can help tackle waste through radiation. Well, this was just one of the submissions at the 33rd meeting of the African Regional Cooperative Agreement for Research, Development and Training on Nuclear Science and Technology, taking place on the sidelines of the 66th General Conference of the IAEA in Vienna. AFRA is an intergovernmental agreement established by African member states to strengthen and enlarge the contribution of nuclear science and technology to socio-economic development on the African continent. Today, participants from different countries deliberated on the solutions to many of the continent's problems, including climate change, food insecurity, and others. Well, Awal Bisala, head International Cooperation and Liaison Nigeria Atomic Energy Agency, joins us now for more on the program. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Millicent, for having me on the program.
Yeah, it's actually Teniola. My colleague Millicent is on ground there with you. So let's get to it then. It's fine.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
this meeting is taking place after many months since the COVID-19 pandemic struck. How have member states coordinated efforts since then?
Thank you very much, Eniola, for the opportunity to talk about AFRA. Well, essentially, because of the advent of COVID-19, which has made physical contact practically impossible, 2020 and then early part of 2021, most of the engagements among AFRA member states have been virtual, and then emails, and of course, some other off-site participation and engagements, essentially.
So we understand that. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is the, late 2021 and this September for the General Conference, 66th General Conference. This is the first time that we're having a full-blown physical meeting where we are seeing ourselves. That's the meeting of AFRA representatives.
So we understand that member states are looking at nuclear solutions to the issues in Africa. Could you throw more light on that for us?
Okay. Thank you again. Nuclear techniques have found immense applications across the globe. But unfortunately for us in the African region, the injection of nuclear technology in our various day-to-day activities have been limited due to knowledge and some other reasons, particularly lack of understanding of the benefits that are in the utilization of nuclear science and technology. For us in Africa, using the platform of AFRA, we have seen that there are actually immense benefits that can help in solving the myriads of problems that we have, particularly in the areas of healthcare, in the areas of agriculture, water resources, socio-economic development generally.
And the IAEA Director General was also at that meeting. What were the commitments, especially towards Africa's Agenda 2063?
Well, not only the IAEA Director General was there, we also had in attendance a number of ministers from Africa, a number of senior government officials, ambassadors. This has added color to the popularization of the use of nuclear techniques in the African region. The presence of the Director General of the IAEA has equally added value to creating awareness on the partnership, enhanced partnership between the IAEA and the African region within the platform of the African Regional Cooperative Agreement. So his presence actually added good color and value to the relationship.
Okay, focusing on Nigeria now, what would you say has been the highlight of Nigeria's participation at this year's IAEA General Conference?
Well, we came as a delegation comprising of people from different backgrounds. We have people from the health sector, the agricultural sector, and some other sectors of economic development in attendance here in Vienna for the 66th IAEA General Conference. And we also had good attendance at the AFRA meeting of the representatives, where the ambassador of Nigeria was in attendance, and several other ambassadors too, as I've said, were in attendance. For us, this is a highlight where we seek for strengthening cooperation and collaboration among African member states so that we can also push the agenda of nuclear science and technology forward within our continent. Somehow we are lagging behind, but I think with this platform and framework, it will help in pushing that agenda forward, where the benefits that are in the deployment of nuclear science and technology will also be brought to the fore for us as Africans to benefit.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Mr. Awa Busala, Head International Cooperation and Liaison, Nigeria Atomic Energy Agency, for your time on the program.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eniola, for having me.
And moving on now, Pan-Africanism has been a compelling vision for the African continent for at least 100 years. As an ideology and movement, it reflects a commitment towards greater collaboration and unity between African countries in tackling the socio-economic issues of the continent. The Mapungubwe Institute, with the Frederick Ebert Stiftung, the Institute of Global Dialogue, and the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences hosted a conference in Pretoria, South Africa, on how to ensure Pan-Africanism remains relevant to end the marginalization of the continent from the global economy. Our correspondent, Brian Pageni, reports.
The theme of the conference was developing a Pan-African agenda dealing with global issues, focusing on Pan-Africanism in the context of big power rivalry, climate change, the post-COVID-19 effects, the fourth industrial revolution, and the rise in populism.
In some ways, what Ms. Strand and our partners are forcing us to think about critically so is a new Pan-Africanism, Pan-African agenda, rooted here so that the majority of us, despite our agenda, despite our class background, that we do find resonance in the prosperity of our continent.
The panel discussion asked the question, what does a pragmatic Pan-Africanism look like given its quest for integration while struggling with its realities and challenges?
We would find that there are examples where citizens are actually more advanced than the formal processes of integration, and they actually know very little about those formal processes, because those formal processes have not done a sufficient job at actually relating and connecting with the informal, or that which is outside of the formal institutions of integration.
One of the things we have noted is that there has never been any referendum on this continent from the 1960s until now that we're speaking, in any of our countries, to ask our people, what do they feel? What do they want in terms of this Pan-African project? There's never been. It's always been an elite-driven project.
We asked participants what expectations future bearers of Pan-Africanism can safely have as Africa confronts the global issues of today's world.
Kids, they must learn Swahili instead of learning French and whatever that they learn, Mandarin, for instance. Swahili is equally important. So for me, those are basic things that we can do from a practical level. Then we can theorize later on finances, regional integration. Those things, they come secondary. Primary, we need to actually work together as Africans.
Pan-Africanism itself must be decolonized, that is refreshed, so that it becomes a more inclusive Pan-Africanism that will recognize and include the political participation of women, the economic participation of women.
Unity of purpose, one, an identity that we can take on and grasp and have ownership over this ideology. And please, our leaders just need to comply so that we can have a borderless Africa, so that we can love one another in truth and in unity, because we are so divided and the division is unnecessary.
The agreement point for many participants is that work in progress and more work still needs to be done for the continent's collective goals to be attained. From Pretoria, South Africa, Brian Pugeni, Channels Television News.
Africa's power situation and the opportunities for investment came under the spotlight at the International Trade and Investment Forum 2022, organized by the Foreign Investment Network on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. Attending this year's event were global leaders, finance experts, and bright minds in forward-thinking solutions for Africa's power problem.
Dr. Nyosi Okonjo The Finn International Trade and Investment Forum 2022, with the theme Power for Africa, was organized to serve as a launching pad for the international business community to explore investment opportunities for Africa's power sector. Discussions were broken into several panels to address the need for international partnerships. Direct investment consultant and group chairman, Foreign Investment Network, Olayinka Fayomi, and U.S. Councilwoman Mercedes Narcisse set the scene for the program.
We have the burden to help 43 million youth in Africa who are jobless today just because they lack opportunity to one, opportunity to electricity, two, opportunity to technology knowledge. And I'm hoping that some of us today here will be able to help us to get to that level.
Well, my job is primarily passing laws and passing the city's budget. I firmly believe that what we do at the city council does have a profound effect on international finance. Our work in the city council can accelerate economic activity through business development and fostering the technological innovations, which I believe in, and improve economic and financial condition at home here in our city has a tremendous effect on the strength of the global economy.
With 770 million Africans living without electricity, and much of that number in sub-Saharan Africa, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, who joined the program virtually, says it's imperative that Africa and her partners work together to generate enough power to help African development.
I personally believe that the resources are out there. All we need to do is to create the conducive environment for investment to come into Africa, for power generation, power distribution, and of course, power transmission.
Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who also joined virtually, highlighted the annual investment gap for Africa, hence the need for improved energy access to improve well-being on the continent.
We know that the International Energy Agency has estimated a $28 billion annual investment gap for energy for the continent up to 2030. We also know we cannot industrialize or have a solid continental manufacturing base without energy. We cannot increase our share of world trade without adding more value to our products through that manufacturing base. In other words, our future well-being on the continent is limited by improved energy access.
President and CEO of Amelia, Chetan Dubey, gives artificial intelligence, which will most likely determine the future of the workforce in the world and where Africa will be by then.
I haven't gone to bed or woken up without having that question haunt me. So I welcome you for the next 9 minutes along in that journey. And I invite a continent of remarkable brain power to join in this revolution that is imminent upon us.
The program continues with panel sessions, which further discuss Africa's energy needs, and ends with an award ceremony to distinguished persons in various industries.
Congratulations. Okay, to ONS, Triumph Limited, congratulations.
And about 15 people are missing and 3 others are confirmed dead after a bridge collapsed in the northern Brazilian state of Amazonas. The Amazonas Fire Department says it's looking for as many as 15 people after the collapse of the bridge on the BR-319 highway in the city of Careiro, about 100 kilometers from the state capital. It adds that another 14 people were injured in the collapse that occurred as some vehicles were crossing the bridge. Due to the collapse of the bridge, locals are forced to cross the river in boats. And Iran's president has warned that he will not accept chaos as authorities continue to crack down on protests that have swept across the country since the death in custody of a young woman. Ibrahim Raisi said Masha Amini's death 2 weeks ago after she was detained by morality police had saddened all. But he added that his government could not allow people to disturb the peace of society through riots. Fresh unrest was reported last night amid a mounting death toll. State media said that 41 people, including security personnel, had been killed and that more than 1,200 have been arrested. One human rights group has said at least 76 protesters have been killed by security forces. Meanwhile, Iranians living in Turkey continue to demonstrate together with Turkish activists outside Iran's consulate in Istanbul against the death of Masha Amini. The crowd chanted slogans and held up banners standing in solidarity with anti-government protesters in Iran. Angry demonstrations have spread to over 80 cities nationwide since September 13. That's the day of the death of 22-year-old Amini, after she was arrested for unsuitable attire by the morality police, who enforced the Islamic Republic's strict dress code.
After 40 years, finally all of the world heard our voice, because 40 years they treat us, I want to cry because we are tired. We are tired from this government. We don't want. After 40 years, finally all of the world heard our voice, because 40 years they treat us.
And still ahead on The World Today. Thanks for staying with us. Britain intends to spend up to £500 million in the Indo-Pacific region and will work with public-private partnerships in green infrastructure projects. And that's according to Foreign Minister James Cleverly. Cleverly also says security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific is indivisible from Europe's, welcoming Singapore and Japan's decision to impose sanctions on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine.
BII, as we call it, is the UK's development finance arm. And through it, we intend to spend up to £500 million in the region over the next 5 years. And we will work with public and private partners in the region to support quality green infrastructure projects in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in Cambodia and Laos. The lessons I take from watching China across my lifetime is that when China departs from global rules and norms, when it aligns itself with aggressive countries like Russia, its standing in the world suffers. We welcome the condemnation of Russia's violations of the UN Charter and the decisions made by many countries in the region, including Singapore, Japan, and the Republic of Korea, to impose sanctions on Russia for its aggression. Russia's violation of the UN Charter sets a dangerous precedent for the whole world. We can see the countries which choose to be committed to trade and commerce, to those which stand up to oppression and coercion, those which seek to tackle climate change, those which look to innovation and technology to make the future better than the past.
Queen Elizabeth II died of old age, according to her death certificate, which has been released by the National Records of Scotland. The certificate records the Queen died at 3:10 p.m. on the 8th of September in Balmoral Castle at the age of 96. Princess Anne is recorded as the person providing the information about the Queen's death. For occupation of the deceased, the official form says Her Majesty the Queen. British Prime Minister Liz Truss has defended her economic plan that has roiled financial markets, saying she's willing to take decisive action to reignite growth and would not reverse the course despite the turmoil. Finance Minister Kwasi Kwarteng sparked turmoil in financial markets last week when he delivered a plan to cut taxes without detailing the impact on the public finances or how the government would reform the economy to spur growth. The pound sank and British government bond yields soared, forcing the Bank of England to revive its bond buying programme in an emergency move on Wednesday to shore up pension funds. Prime Minister Truss says the government had to take urgent action to protect households and businesses from surging energy bills.
I think we have to look at what situation this country would be in if we hadn't acted. People were facing fuel bills, energy bills of up to £6,000. We had very high inflation expectations and an economic slowdown. And what we've done is we've taken decisive action. First of all, to make sure that nobody is paying more than a typical fuel bill of £2,500. That will come in this Saturday. But also to reduce our tax burden, to make sure we grow the economy and also curb inflation. And that's so important. It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis brought about by Putin's war in Ukraine. And what was right is that Britain took decisive action to help people get through what is going to be a difficult winter.
Meanwhile, analysts say the new British government is under huge pressure after a week of chaos in the financial markets, triggered by plans for tax cuts. They say the government needs to grow up over the market slump.
I think we've got through a rocky couple of days for the economy. The Bank of England has now intervened in the government bond market and has bought a couple of weeks' worth of time and stability. It can't continue with its bond buying programme indefinitely. I think that ultimately that would end up being quite inflationary. But as this is a temporary targeted intervention that's set to last in the bond market for only a couple of weeks, I think that there is it's a credible action that won't boost inflation. But we do really need to see now the government grow up, look at the outlook in the financial markets and change course. It clearly has lost trust and needs to start rebuilding that quickly, and that requires it, I think, to both take greater control of government borrowing, but also set out some credible economic and fiscal forecasts to justify some of the decisions it's making. We need that independent oversight for the OBR once again, and once we get that, we will hopefully start to rebuild some credibility, and that'll ease some of the pressures in the financial and economic system. Well, I think the pound is going to have to be sacrificed in order to protect the economy. At the moment, the pound's value is based on an assumption that the Bank of England will increase interest rates all the way to 6% early next year. But I think that's simply implausible. That would entail too much paying for households and businesses, and you would see issues with financial stability because so many of those households and businesses would be struggling to make those interest repayments on their loans. And so I think it's much more likely that the Bank of England accepts that sterling weakens a bit further as a consequence of not raising interest rates too dramatically. And the consequences of that is that we see, a further wave of inflation that affects us all. That will be the price that I think the Bank of England will be willing to pay in order to prevent a financial crisis.
Still on the UK economy, the UK toy giant Hamleys has unveiled investment-worthy toys ahead of Christmas. The company says the move is to accommodate the cost of living crisis ahead of the holidays.
I know a certain expert who knows how to do this. Thank you.
Nothing in. Oh, there we go. So now you're ready to just pull the trigger, yeah?
There's some new technologies going. We've got a fantastic Buzz Lightyear, and what's different about him is that there is vaporized steam that comes out of his jetpack, so that's kind of new technology that we've not seen before. So you've got a kind of an iconic toy with the technology move on. We also have a new remote control car that does different kind of speeds. It jumps, it flips, it jumps higher than any other toy that we've had before. So again, that's kind of new technology. We've also got kind of iconic things. We've got you know, the Play-Doh cart, which is absolutely fantastic. So you can make your own ice cream. You've got 27 different tools that you can play with. You've got different colours, and it all packs away really nicely. So what's really nice is that these are iconic toys with a slight move on.
I really like it.
So the toys are all kind of investment-worthy pieces, and we really want to kind of focus on that. And these are just our recommendations for top 10 toys that we think children want to see under the tree. And we wanted children to, and parents to invest in products that they can see their children playing with, you know, kind of going forward. We also have over 50,000 products in the store, starting from about £2.50. So we have lots of different toys and lots of different trends to kind of cater to every need.
Yes, Santa is preparing to come to town. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Oyeitayo.